Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maya Alexis and I'm a software engineer in the finance tech industry. Today I have a really big guest. This is very special for you guys. This is Pat, and let me tell you about Pat's history and what he does. Pat is he has 4 AWS certifications: the Cloud Practitioner, the Certified Solution Architect Associate, the Certified Developer Associate, the SysOps Administrator Associate, Azure Administrator Associate exam, and the CompTIA Security Plus exam. So he is very much more experienced than I am, and we're so glad to have him. Educational background: he has a degree in psychology from Morehouse University. He went to coding bootcamp for full stack development in Georgia Tech, and he has a master's in business administration. His career background is in front-end development, project management, full stack development, technical consulting, and he has done technical training at companies such as AWS and Google Cloud. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for coming, Pat. How are you?
Hey, what's up, Maya? How are you?
I'm good. So to get right into questions, because I wanted to bring you on this show because a lot of my subscribers ask me different questions that I personally feel like that I'm not experienced enough to talk about.
Yeah.
And I feel like someone else with way more experience in career longevity should be better equipped to answer these questions. So
Okay.
to get into the first question, you have a degree in psychology. So I
Yeah.
wanted to know what motivated you to go into a coding boot camp and into the technical industry.
Man, so to be honest, man, so I came out of school in 2008, right? And 2008 was just a really tough time. This was when, the market had crashed and we were going through a recession. And I had just had a kid, I wasn't expecting to have a son. And so I was just kind of floating around, to be honest, and I actually got started in tech before that. So I started a nonprofit called Urban STEM Academy. And the reason I started that was because I really just didn't have anything else to do. I was looking for something to really sink my teeth into. I'm from Savannah, so there weren't like a lot of well-paying, high-paying jobs at that time. And so really, I just saw a blog article that one of my friends posted, and it was called 8 Reasons Why You Need to Teach Your Children How to Code. And my first thought was, man, this is dope. I want to teach my son this, but I also want to teach other children this. And then of course, that really led me to learning how to code so that I could teach other people. And so I really honestly just started learning how to code, never really imagining that, I was gonna, become a developer or any of those kinds of things, right? Like just really to teach kids how to code. And it just kind of snowballed after that, man. One thing just led to another. I liked it. It put me around a lot of really great people who were willing to help me, and I got a chance to build things. And I like to consider myself like a continuous learner. So one thing about development, as you well know, or really any tech industry, it's really more about your ability to learn than it is anything else, right? Like you need to be able to, because things are constantly changing, right? Like there's a new, this library that you've been using has just changed. And so it was just really challenging. And so that's how I started. And then everything else just kind of snowballed from there.
Okay. And so tell us, what was coding boot camp like? Because I did my degree in school. I've always been interested to know, what is the experience of coding boot camp?
Man, so I think first off, I think it's important to mention that so I did my coding boot camp through Georgia Tech, right? So, it was already a reputable university.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why it was really attractive to me. Well, was one, because I got to do it part-time. So a lot of times you've got these full-time coding boot camps, and they want you to just like come every day, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5,
Mhm.
which then sort of it serves as a barrier for many people. Like, I couldn't afford to not work for 3 months while I was learning this new skill. I already had a kid, I was engaged, and all these different things. And so um there are a lot of different experiences that you can have. Like there are a lot of coding boot camps, and so I consider myself to be fortunate that I went through that experience with the institution that I did. As far as the experience, man, it was intense, right? Like so essentially you are learning a framework, right? So the boot camp that I went to, it was specifically for full stack web development, right? So, full stack is, for the people that don't know, it's being able to do front end, back end, as well as handling the server programming as well. So essentially, ideally when you walk away from that boot camp, you understand the technologies that it takes and what it takes for you to create a full application. So it was a lot, right? Like luckily for me, so I did that coding boot camp in 2017, I think. Yeah, I think it was 2017. I had already been exposed to coding on my own before that. I just had been learning on my own. And I think I got to a moment where I knew I couldn't teach myself anymore, or at least if I wanted to be more efficient, I needed to go and actually be in the environment and be immersed in it and be around other people. So it was intense, man. I mean, it was 6 months. So, because we did it part-time, we only met 3 times a week. We met twice in the evenings,
Mhm.
and then we met once on a Saturday.
Wow.
So the experience was it was cool, man. So I mean, every week we were getting lectures, but then we had projects all the time. So the benefit of that is when I walked away from that boot camp, I also had a portfolio,
Yeah.
right? Um, Met some people, like I networked with some folks. The my instructor was also really accomplished, and so I got to learn from him. So I think one of the biggest values to being in some type of formal training program is not so much the content that you learn, like the actual course content. It's all the anecdotal information that you get from the instructor and the other people that are there, right? Like
Mhm.
ask them, what's it like? What are these skills like? So I think that that was really valuable for me. Definitely hard, man. So I didn't understand everything the first time around. So I think that is really important to mention. If anybody who's watching this interview or who will watch it, you're not going to understand everything the first time around, but that's not really the point, right? So a part of being a developer is knowing where to go and look for things when you don't know the answer,
Yeah.
right? And so or how to systematically find the correct answer, or how to solve a problem, how to research, how to go to Stack Overflow and find the answer if you need to, and then apply that. So I didn't walk out of there knowing everything, but I walked out of there with a really good foundation that set the tone for everything else that I'm doing now. Right. Like
Mhm.
I think one of the biggest things that I get asked often is, like, where should I start? Should I start in front end development? Should I be a back end developer? What should I do? I think it's really important for you to understand, like, so even if you plan to be a back end developer, you need to know how what you do, or what the person upstream is doing, right? Like, it's really important to have a full picture of everything that goes into building an application, right? From deployment to actually coding the front end, and then how do we integrate the front end with the back end? How do we code the back end? How do we secure it? And you may not do all of those things in your day job, right? Or you may not do all of those things in your company, but it's really important for you to understand how all these things tie in together.
Yeah.
So I think that my coding bootcamp experience gave me a lot of breadth, right? And another thing that I would like to mention, or at least say here, don't expect to walk out of the coding boot camp feeling like you're an expert, right? So the boot camp itself is really about exposure. And then the boot camp will develop your breadth. And then it's up to you to then go and develop your depth in different subject areas as well.
Okay, that what I'm just about to ask will kind of branch off of that a little bit. For a lot of my subscribers always ask me how can they get into tech, not the non-traditional way of just going through it in college. So like with coding boot camp, what would you recommend on how they even get into a coding boot camp, or like how can they choose? Because there's so many coding boot camps out here. And then
Yeah.
after coding boot camp, what could this mean for them if you're saying like it's just for you got exposure and breadth. And then also, what is another option of non-boot camp way of how people can get into tech?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of information out there just generally, right? In terms of coding boot camps, there's so many. I would try to find a coding boot camp that has a heavy weight on career development, right? So one of the other things that was really cool about the Georgia Tech coding boot camp is that we there were people on staff whose sole responsibility it was to just help us find jobs, right? Help us, you
Okay.
know, professionally develop, right? So they helped us create resumes. While we were in the coding boot camp, one of the things that we built, one of our projects was an online portfolio. So if I had to choose, or my advice to anyone who's considering a boot camp, is to try to find one that relies heavily on professional development, because ultimately you want to get a job after you leave there, right? Like that's sort of the point. So make sure that, or when you're, going around and you're looking, always make sure that you find one that is placing their candidates. Um if they already have relationships with employers, that's really cool. In terms of getting into tech, man, that is the $1 million question. The truth of the matter is, you just got to build stuff. You know what I mean? Like, to be honest, there are so many different resources that exist. So when I started learning how to code just on my own, I did Code Academy a lot. So I don't know if Code Academy is still free. I think it's like now paid, but back then it was free, right? And so that's really what exposed me to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There's also, I used to do these events called Rails Bridge, right? And there are, like, you can go and just find these docs. So Rails Bridge are basically Ruby on Rails events, and it's open source. So all of the documentation that you would need to build an application and show other people how to build an application, excuse me, it's just available to you for free, right? So if you just Google Rails Bridge docs or Rails Bridge documentation, it'll come up. Another good source is Free Code Camp. So all of these are really good resources to help you get an understanding of generally what it means in terms of like coding.
Yeah.
Um, but then there's more to it than that. So the other important thing to mention is that there are so many different ways that you can get into tech other than just being a developer, right? And I think that people often forget that. So, usually when we have this conversation, it's around how do I get into tech? And what they really mean is, how do I become a developer? And the way that you become a developer is the same way that you become a writer, or the same way that you become a chef, or the same way that you become an athlete, right? And the way that you do those things is practice. So you build things, and then you get around other people who are also building things, and then they help you learn how to build things better. And then they know people, and then eventually as your portfolio grows, then you become strong enough, right? But the thing is that when I went to a coding boot camp, I was already 30 years old.
Hmm.
I had already worked in economic development. I had already started my own nonprofit. And so when I came out of that boot camp, I was not looking to be a junior anything, right? Like, I wasn't looking to be a junior developer, because I had already had experience and I was already a professional. And so what became important for me was figuring out a way that I could leverage all of the existing experience that I had in order for me to get into technology. The first job offer that I got after I got out of boot camp was actually with a company called 18F. Um, 18F is a government agency. It was started during the Obama administration, And essentially what it is a digital agency that exists inside of the government. Their whole focus is on helping to modernize many of the public facing applications for government agencies. I ended up turning down that job because I went abroad with my wife, but it was a six-figure job offer. I would have taken it, had it been a different time in my life.
Wow.
But the reason and the position that I got was a consulting software engineer. So my job was going to be to build out the proofs of concepts, and then once the proof of concepts have been built, then I could pass that along to the actual engineering team. So the reason why I got that job is because I'd already had experience working with customers and people, and I knew how to, work with different stakeholders. So I leveraged my experience that wasn't necessarily related to tech to get a job in the tech field. So if you work for any business, whatever position you have, that position exists at Google. It exists at any of these other tech firms. So if you're a designer, they need designers, they need marketers, they need salespeople, they need human resources people, they need project managers, like literally any job that you can think of. Like there's even a person at Google that does, their whole job is just to help people be more productive. Like
Mhm.
they are like the executive something of productivity, right? If there's any job you can think of at some of these larger tech companies, any position that you can imagine, it probably exists in tech, right? And so the question, how do you get into tech? It's really just figure out what tech companies want, right? Like what's their mission, and then start to research that and align with it. There are a whole lot of ways to get into tech other than just being a developer. If you want to get into tech as a developer, practice, right? Like practice, get around other people, go to meetups, start meeting people, get better at your craft, and then eventually uh you can get in, right? Like, and I mean there are junior positions. I've actually never worked as a developer, right? I've been a trainer, I've been a program manager. So I went to the coding boot camp and it helped me to understand tech, but that's really not my personality. And it's not the thing it's not the most value that I bring to a company, right? And so figure out what it is that you do that makes you unique. Maybe that's not sitting in front of a computer 10 hours a day. Maybe it's, managing the people that are the developers, right? Like it can be lots of different things. Figure out what that is, figure out how you can use that value and bring it to a tech company, and then just start talking to people and reaching out.
Mhm. Thank you. So the biggest question, because my channel is about AWS certifications and stuff, what motivated you to take 4 AWS certifications?
So I was working as a technical trainer, and so any class so I had the cloud practitioner cert first before I worked at AWS. So long story short, I was just talking about when I went abroad. So I went to Bahrain and essentially just ended up working as a program manager for a company that was there. It was they were a subcontract. They were based out of the UK, but they were in the Middle East working with a telecom company. And that telecom company was migrating a whole bunch of government workloads, government servers from their on premises to AWS. So I got hired as a program manager. This is a prime example of like not necessarily doing the work, but understanding how the tech works
Mhm.
allows you to manage people. So as a part of that engagement, I needed to get a certification, right? I needed to understand AWS specifically, and so I got my cloud practitioner cert. Now, fast forward a year and a half, AWS, a recruiter then reached out to me. Um, so I do want to mention that too. So as far as getting into tech, one of the best things that you can do is to get a LinkedIn account and start putting your certifications on that account and say that you are open for opportunities. You would be so surprised at how many people will give you a job just because you have a cloud practitioner cert or because you have a solutions architect cert, right? But so that's a little sidebar. But so AWS recruiter reached out to me, for a technical trainer role. And as a part of that role, so what I do as a technical trainer is essentially I am an internal trainer for AWS, right? Or external trainer. So if a company, wants to train up 25 of their IT, 25 people in their IT department, then they will come and they'll pay AWS to have an internal trainer come in and spend a couple of days, lecturing them and doing demos and doing labs with them about AWS services. So as an instructor, I cannot teach those classes unless I have the certification,
Yeah.
right? So um my solutions arc cert, my sysops, my developer cert, all of those I got while I was at AWS. So that's one thing that I do want to stress. All I had was a cloud practitioner cert, right? So everybody who's like waiting until they get 25 different certs to go and apply for a job, don't do that. Like all I had was the base level cert and I got a job at AWS, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so essentially I got those certs just because I needed to. Frankly, it was just a part of the job.
Okay. And so a lot of my subscribers are kind of starting out new and they're more focused on the cloud practitioner and the solutions architect associate. So what advice would you give them first about taking the cloud practitioner?
So the cloud practitioner, um, so I think that one's pretty straightforward. Just make sure that you understand. So there's like the 5 value propositions of cloud, right? Which are, man, it's been a while since I had to say these.
Yeah.
It's cost optimization, right? Man, security. Um, what else is there? It's being able to reach a global audience very quickly. It is, you don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about managing or maintenance of your servers or anything like that anymore. And then you can stop guessing about capacity, right? So make sure that you understand those 5 things and why they matter.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and just understand the basics, right? So if you understand that, just generally, what's the value proposition of cloud? Most of the questions you'll be able to answer, right? Understand what the basic portions, right? So like EC2s, understanding what those are, not necessarily how to use them,
Yeah.
but EC2s, understanding S3 buckets and what all that, what you use those for is pretty much a good starting point for the cloud practitioner cert. As it relates to the solutions architect cert, the main things, well, there are a couple of things that you need to make sure that you understand. Make sure that you understand EC2 instances and how they work, right? So understanding maybe a little bit better about like what are the details of an EC2 instance, right? So when would I want to use an EC2 instance? How do I, how do I remote into an EC2 instance? What's metadata, right? How do I make an EC2 instance? Those things are really important. Make sure that you understand databases, understand the difference between um, a NoSQL database and a SQL database, or a relational and non-relational database. Understand the different offerings that AWS has for each of those. Make sure that you understand DynamoDB. DynamoDB is the non-relational database in AWS, and understand how it differs, right? So make sure that you understand. So there's pretty much, when it comes to databases, there are a few things that are always important, right? So that's going to be your security, like how do you secure it? How do you back it up? And then how do you protect it from faults, right? So fault tolerance. So you want to make sure you understand how do you architect both your EC2s and your databases to make sure that if there's a failure, that you can recover, or that you don't lose any data. So
Yeah.
that's really important. Make sure that you understand how to do that with EC2s, all of the different databases that we have. Make sure that you understand load balancing. Make sure that you understand multi-availability zones, right? And just make sure that you can talk about all of those things. If you can do that, you're in a pretty good spot. That's about 60 to 70% of your test. When we talk about exam readiness, and so I've taught those courses before too. for AWS specifically, what we always recommend is that you read the question one time fully, and then you read the answers one time fully. So there's what trips a lot of people up is there can be multiple answers that are true. You're looking for the answer that is most true, right? So where a lot of people get mixed up is there may be a question that's like, well, what's the most cost effective way for us to do such and such, right? And both A and C are correct, but one of those is the most correct, right? And so really, I find that many people know the material, they just don't test well. Like they get all stressed out and
Yeah.
they get anxious and all that kind of stuff. So realize that you have a lot of time to take this test, right? So relax. Um, mark your answers, like meaning mark those questions. So if you're unsure about it, mark the questions and then come back and review them before you submit your test. Um, Another thing that I would mention is again, I worked at AWS. I worked in the curriculum, the training and curriculum organization. So, we tested these questions. We worked directly with the people who make the test. We are oftentimes the people who are preparing people for these exams. I know many people that failed that test the first time who work at AWS, right? So like don't feel discouraged if you don't pass it the first time. It's not easy. The other thing that I would recommend for passing any certification is actually go and put your hands on those services, right? So many of the concepts as it relates to cost optimization, as it relates to fault tolerance, disaster recovery, and then just those little nuances about those services and how they actually work in the real world. You learn those faster when you play around with it in the actual console. So what I would recommend is I used a cloud guru, right?
Yeah.
There's many other different types of services where you can just pay a monthly subscription and you can take the course, but you can also take the labs. AWS also has many free self-paced labs. Use those. They will definitely help you understand the services. They will help you understand and just kind of remember what the little unique nuances about each of those services. And I think if you do that, if you study but also put your hands on it, do the hands-on stuff, you'll be in a really good position in terms of passing the certs.
Do you recommend them watching Udemy, or I know probably looking at white pages with AWS, but any outside sources you would recommend?
Yeah. So Udemy, I use Udemy to pass my Azure cert, right? Like I took a Udemy class. I use a cloud guru. A cloud guru is one of the ones that we use a lot internally. So
Mhm.
all of us use that to
Wow.
help pass certs. Cloud Academy is also a really good one. So in my experience, a cloud guru is really good to help you pass the certification. But as a trainer, or really if you're going to have to use these services in the real world, then you're going to have to make that you're going to have to make your understanding of it way more robust, right?
Yeah.
So Cloud Academy was really good at helping me sort of flesh out my understanding and my experience with services beyond certification. So I think that going back to getting into tech and getting your certs and all of that, I do think it's important to mention like having the cert is not enough, right? So so it's kind of like this double truth, right? Like there's a duality to it. Do you need the cert in order to be able to get the job, right? Or do you need all of the certs in order to be able to get a job? No. But the cert, there are many people who have certifications who do not know how to use or to actually apply any of this information in a real world scenario. So I think if you're planning to get certified, if you want to get into tech, finishing the coding boot camp and getting the certification is not enough. Getting the certification in AWS is not enough, right? Like it can be, it can be, it can be either, right? Like I know many people who are very skilled at developing and very skilled at architecting, and who work and don't have the certs. And I also know people who have the certs who don't know anything, right? And so it's important for you to like actually use the stuff, even if it's just on your own. Like make sure that you can at the very least go in and run an EC2 instance and open it up and be able to access it via the internet using security groups, right? Like make sure that you know how to do those kinds of things, because you will get exposed, right? Like passing the cert doesn't mean you know it. Like you will at some point get exposed, right?
Yeah. And so you did talk already about your role as a trainer, and what do you, even though you said you worked at AWS, what do you currently do?
Yeah, so now I am the global lead of customized training for Google Cloud, right? So still in the I'm still in the cloud learning business, right? But what I do now is essentially I no longer do the trainings. I just manage a team of people that do. And specifically, I manage so customized training is basically anything that's not standard, right? So if some big company comes and they say, hey, we need advanced training on this particular service, my team is the one who will actually scope it out and then we'll deliver it, right? So I sort of um I guess graduated to a more strategic role, right? So I don't train anymore, but it definitely helps because again, even though I'm not the person building these servers, I am serving the people that are, right? I'm serving the people that need to learn this to do it on the day to day. And now I'm also serving the people that need to teach this to those people. And
Yeah.
so having that experience, having been a trainer, having that experience of knowing what these people have to do on the day to day allows for me to do that job much better.
Okay. And so my final question is like, is there any other general advice that you have or anything you want to plug in about your own personal companies or
Um,
businesses?
yeah, so I mean, I have a business on the side, right? I have a branding agency. We do web development and application development. So that's techpeerconsulting.com. So tech and then peer, techpeerconsulting.com. Also just, if I'm always down to talk to people. So if you watch this video and you're looking for a coach, I'm actually starting to do coaching sessions for people. And I generally just love talking to people who are, trying to figure things out in their career. All of the jobs that I've ever had, have been because someone helped me get there. So I look for ways to pay it forward. So yeah, look me up on LinkedIn, Patrick Bentley, right? Like I'm pretty easy to find. I'm probably the only Black Patrick Bentley on all of LinkedIn. I'm the Black dude that works for Google, so I'm not hard to find. Reach out to me for sure. Like if you just want to holler at me, like I'm not hard to reach. I'm not inaccessible. I try to make myself very accessible. If you want some career coaching, like definitely can help you do that. In terms of general advice, so one of the things that I was often told when I worked at AWS was like, you get in these positions and you get imposter syndrome, right? So, you get there and I deal with it even right now, right? Even though I'm 36 and I've been doing all this stuff for a long time. And even as you were reading my resume and stuff off, I was like, if this was another person, that would sound so impressive,
Yeah,
right? Like,
it is
so
impressive.
so I still deal with all of those things, right? And so the advice that I would give to anybody, right, especially Black folks who are trying to get into tech, there are going to be moments where you're going to feel like you don't belong, right, or that you're faking it. um Always remember that you're there for a reason. Like you belong there. Wherever you are at that moment, you belong there. um Try to find and network with other people. As you progress through your career, it becomes much more about, do people trust you? Do they see you as a competent person, and do they like you, right? And those are the people that they think about, and those are the people that they give opportunities to first, right? Culturally, we have this thing where we're kind of like, yeah, you go to work and you do your job and that is it, right? These people are not your friends.
Yeah.
um there's truth to that, right? But if you're trying to like really get to those big to that money, right? Like people need to like you and trust you. And the only way that they're going to like you and trust you is if they know you, right? And I feel like the only way for people to really know you is for you to be your authentic self, right? So come show up, be authentic, be friendly, right? Don't ever forget that your perspective, whoever you are, your experiences and your perspective is something that is unique to you. Other people will have other things, and you will often be in rooms where you feel like, damn, these people are so smart. What is it that I have to offer? And what you have to offer is your perspective, right? So don't ever forget that. Um, and the only other thing I'll say is there's no substitute for hard work, right? Like grind, right? Like get the cert, but don't stop. Um, just grind. It's a grind, and it doesn't stop. Like, you as a technical person understand, like, you have to constantly be learning.
Yeah.
Like, don't think that when you get the job it's over. Like, that's just the beginning. You know what I'm saying? And so don't forget that. Don't do something you hate, because eventually you'll burn out. So make sure whatever you're doing you love, and that's it, right? Just remember you belong wherever you are. That would be my advice.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming.
no
Thank
doubt.
you for
Thank you for
all your
having me.
advice.
Yeah.
I'll leave all of his information in the description bar for you to be able to contact him and his businesses and endeavors. And thank you so much.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you for having me, Maya.